In a sparsely populated fringe strand of navigable galactic space, secreted in a tucked-away corner of a small, unremarkable sector that was last properly surveyed nearly a millennium ago, a weathered and creaking station orbits a small grey dwarf planet without a name. Centuries ago, the station was called Galactic Trade Subnode Kappa Epsilon 35. Cargo haulers of the time used the shorthand GAL sub KE35, though that knowledge is lost to all now living, only persisting as notes stored in dusty archive servers. As faster-than-light travel improved and subnodes were no longer needed on the major trade routes, the station was largely abandoned and forgotten. The original designations, both formal and informal, have been forgotten. To those who know, it is now simply Bentpanel Station. No Congressional Navy patrols visit Bentpanel Station, not since it stopped being relevant to trade security. No politician with scruples knows of its existence, other than through rumour and innuendo, though a handful who lack scruples know it perfectly well. A hideaway for the powerful to conduct their dirty deeds off the grid has always existed, and they will always exist. There is no police force. There is only an elderly Yelenian caretaker, tall and stark, quiet as the grave, with a face as pinched as desiccated quellfruit. Her word is law. Even the worst here obey it. This is the extent of the law at Bentpanel Station. Her rules are simple. Bentpanel is neutral ground. No violence. Respect the facilities. Pay your tab. Those who have failed to follow these rules are few, and are no more. The largest pressurized chamber on Bentpanel Station, and the only reason for its continued existence, is a bar, and a few connected rooms for rent. The bar is known, at least in concept, to every species. An equivalent exists on every planet. A dinghy room with steady but not deafening background music. A place for the imbibing of various intoxicants, and for the completion of deals that must be completed outside of the glaring light of law and justice. Major drug traffickers, weapons runners, mercenaries, con artists, and the relatively respectable card sharks and sex workers all frequent the bar. It is a dark and tattered yet comfortable space. A 360-degree bar with comfortable stools and on the fringes darker, more comfortable booze, which the light of the bar nearly reaches but does not. The upholstery is frayed and peeling, but cozy in the way only broken-in furniture can be. Bentpanel is never quite busy, but it is never quite slow. Sometimes, times like tonight, were twilight by both the station's clock and by the various clockwork machinations and circadian rhythms of the galaxy's ne'er-do-wells. Most of the temporary inhabitants, and the few permanent ones, were asleep. The rowdy partiers had finally been defeated by their substances of choice, and lay slumbering either on the floor of the bar or in one another's exhausted appendages. This night, a scattering of 5 weathered souls from far corners of the galaxy burned the last of their midnight oil, deep in their final cups. As various war stories wound down and conversational topics dried up, the 5 finalists kept the conversation going, not quite ready to surrender to rest. The conversation began to linger into uncomfortable silence until Sylar spoke. He was a rangy, weathered, and thin reptiloid biped, with an equally thin and weathered voice. He plied his trade as a semi-reliable trafficker of ingestible substances, both amusing and dangerous, and at Bentpanel, semi-reliable was as good as it got. "Any of you run into humans much?" A beat or drink induced confusion, and then murmurs of acknowledgement circulated in the group, though none spoke up louder than a basic acknowledgement. All knew the galaxy's comic relief species, but none wanted to chime in. Sylar saw this as tacit permission to continue his story. "We had this human assistant engineer when I was running with Pondy Yayaran's crew, back when he had that huge old freighter that was beat to hell. I can't remember the name. A low bass rumble emerged from the gloom. The source was a large, somewhat obese furred mammal, seated 2 booths to his right. The Starlit Enchantress. Scylla hissed a reedy laugh. That's right, Jimmy, the Starlit Enchantress. What a joke. That ship made those reeking garbage scows on Metrolia look pretty, and it ran about as well as it looked. Anyway, we're just coming in on our final burn to Dillion Free, and the reactor containment system decided, hey, what a fun time to shut down. Naturally, we figured we were dead. We were way too far out for a tow before we got cooked. Anyway, 5 minutes later, the system just goes back online. None of us knew what was happening. How could we? Everyone knows when reactor con systems go down, they stay down, unless you can spare 2 days in dry dock. But not this time. Turns out the human managed to rerun the connection by using an active homing torpedo. The Trillium casing Ponty used on his aftermarket consortium fast torps was just the right conductor for the power routing system on that ancient reactorcon Ponty has scraped up. The station master at Dillion Free lost his bleeding mind when he saw it. Evacuated a whole arm of the dock. It was a fully live torpedo. The captain confronted the human about it, and he just said, better probably dead than definitely dead. Chuckles emerged from all corners of the bar. All were incredulous, but none disbelieved. The casual recklessness of humans was not a rare story, just always an amusing one. Humans were a new enough species to mostly be a mystery, and the coalescing opinion was that they were a species of jovial, blundering amusements. Competent enough, smart enough, but mostly kept around for comedy value. Captain's jaw was hanging open, but he couldn't come up with a counterpoint. He blustered a while and dismissed everyone. A few rotations after that, Human is the lead engineer, and the old lead is the new assistant. Apparently the old lead didn't even moan about the demotion, said the human was clearly more cut out for it. Me, I think he was just afraid of how crazy that human was. Imagine, a live torpedo to complete a circuit! Scylla shook his head, and took a long pour from his fizzing yellow beverage, which to a human would smell vaguely of kitchen cleanser, but to Scylla, smell like home. Silence descended for a moment, before a wispy, bubbling voice came from the vivid purple cetacean at the bar, 6 of her 8 legs languidly draped over the stool, the last 2 suctioned to its green-blue, foamy drink. That's honestly not so unusual for humans. They can get pretty fleckin' wild. How many have you met? Scylla responded after draining the last drops of his glass. Only that engineer that I've actually talked to. I've seen a few others, but never got to know them. How about you, Ylera? A few, for when I served on a hospitality ship. Like for injured soldiers? No, that's a hospital ship. Hospitality ship. A luxury cruiser. For vacations. We got a fair number of humans. You know the sort of ship. Pampered rich sentients jumping around to see nebula and quasars while they mate with each other's wives and eat an offensive amount of food. Pointless people who have no idea how to spend a credit. A murmur of agreement courses through the bar. Bentpanel Station is seedy, but it has soul. The idle rich are no friends of its guests. We had this security officer, Human. Went by some short name that I think sounded like Zack. Zack hisses a brief chuckle. Zack is the Slithian name for an indigestible meal. He said he had been a bouncer at the clubs on Old Scallon. I didn't really buy that a human would be able to keep those crowds in line, but he had an energy about him. Coiled tight as a spring. Well, one day while orbiting an active quasar, one of these rich jerks decides to deactivate the multispectral shielding on the observation deck because it's interfering with his video capture setup. Never mind that the exotic radiation is extremely harmful to most sentients on the deck. So he steps into a control alcove and starts poking around for the maintenance controls. He's so focused on finding the controls, he doesn't feel Zack looming over him until he gets lifted in the air. Oh, the absolute fit he had! hollering about his money and influence as Zack tossed him out of the room, telling Zack he's going to have his father mobilize fleets against the humans, that he controls politicians. Zack listened politely and then dropped him in the brig. "So, what happened?" asked Scylla. So in all this ranting, Rich Guy never noticed Zack was using his own vid recorder to record everything this idiot was saying. Then he uploaded it to his terminal and sent it directly to Rich Guy's dad, who actually was as powerful as he said.
"So, did Zack get killed?"
purred Chimi, stretching and displaying his claws. "No, the opposite. Powerful Daddy sends him some hush money, and at the next port of call, Rich Guy gets dragged away by some very serious-looking guards in suits. I guess Daddy didn't like having his name dropped because his son wanted to act like a cloaca on a cruise ship." A murmur of laughter split the bar.
"How about you, Hammer?"
Chimi growled to the furthest corner of the bar.
"Any crazy human stories?"
A longer silence than the last few. Longer by a lot.
"Bent panel control to Hammer."
Chimi purred laughter at his own intoxicated wit. "Yeah?" a quiet voice nearly whispered from the dark.
"Okay, so what is it?"
"Yeah, Hammer, don't hold out," Scylla chuckled. "It's not this sort of story." "So there is a story," Ylira bubbled, "So there is a story," Ylira bubbled decisively, like a blood sniffing attorney on cross-examination. "Yeah, there's a story." Realizing that her barmates would not let the matter go, Hema sat forward, the bar lights casting her pale green skin with the same yellow shade cast on her gritty jumpsuit. "Remember how I told you I used to work the silent sector?"
"Yeah," Chimmy laughed. "I've always been amazed you survived trade runs on that route."
"I wasn't on trade runs," Hema murmured, in a voice as brittle as glass. The laughter stopped and a heavier silence filled the room. "Then what were you doing?" Scylla asked pointedly. But of course he already knew. There were only two things a sentient could do in the silent sector. Cargo runs and... "I was with the Quiet." The silence in the bar grew heavy enough to weigh on all. It was something tangible in the air. A loathsome weighted blanket of meaning. A den of low-lies Bentpanel may have been, but the Quiet was something else. The most notorious pirate gang in the galaxy. All sentients that survived an encounter with the Quiet had their tongues removed, and there were few enough that survived. It had been decades since an attack was reported, but their legend was cruel enough to still be fodder for frightening stories around a dim light. "Hema," Scylla weakly spilled. "How could you be with those Krellits?" His cutting gaze, mingling fear, disgust, and betrayal at this side of his spacer friend, was absorbed by Hema with no anger being returned, and finally a curious look and a small, mysterious half-smile in return. "I could tell you the reasons. Being taken as a prize, one they chose to raise as a mascot instead of a slave, and then a partner instead of a mascot, then a princess instead of a partner. I could tell you it's all I ever knew. I could tell you the galaxy is full of monsters who do monstrous things, but it would all just be an excuse. I knew what I was doing. I always knew." "But how are you out? They don't let their people leave. Ever." "No." Hema smiled weakly. "No, they didn't." The silence grew. The bar was hostile, and nobody was drinking anymore. But nobody had left. Their gazes cut into Hema, silently granting her license to continue. "It was my 8th year with the Quiet. I was serving on one of their best ships. It was a gutted and rebuilt Orion 3 medium cruiser, stolen from a scrapyard when the Republic went to the Orion 4. It was tougher than either Republic design. The Quiet didn't care about safety. Minimal rad screens, no power output safeties. It wasn't comfortable and didn't have good range. It was a gut hook, plain and simple. A knife in the dark. A ship killer. And it killed its fill, capturing them and hollowing them out. Cargo ships mostly, but also some rich guy luxury pieces and even a few Republic military craft. We had so many kill marks painted on the flanks that we were running out of places for them. One day we see this fat new prize, a wholly unknown kind of ship. Bulbous, minimal weapons, it looked basic but new and absolutely packed with cargo. Boarding was easy, and it was full of cargo. Living cargo. It was one of those human ones, the Horizon colony ships. They took a wrong turn and ended up in the silent sector. Poor bastards. Horror fills the bar. The thought of a colony ship bursting with hundreds of families straying across the Quiet is the very stuff of nightmares. Even worse that it was a human colony ship. The Horizon series had become a galactic symbol of hope and growth, turning barren rocks into garden planets and bringing back struggling planets from the brink. It was even called a good luck charm to see one on a cargo run. The idea of one of those being hollowed by the Quiet was harrowing. We couldn't believe a payday like this. Slave cargo was worth more than any other. The Republic might have banned slavery, but there were plenty of rimworlds that wouldn't turn their noses up, and we always did a brisk trade. We didn't take any time at all to get them shocked, shackled, and into cages. They were just farmers and miners, not fighters. The only anomaly was this kid. Just a kid, 13 years old, by herself. No parent, no guardian. Even the other humans acted confused. We shrugged and figured maybe she was a stowaway. We threw her in a pen with the others and set course back to base, with the colony ship on an EM tow line behind our cruiser.
Hema, you sold humans into slavery? Humans?
Chimi said disbelievingly. Hema stared without answering for a long moment, before looking, with her eyes unfocused, past her listeners. I don't know when I started feeling like I never had before. Maybe when Talet hit one of the kids with his rifle butt and broke his nose. Maybe when I took it all in. Maybe the first time I made eye contact with a kid that had nobody. We had gutted plenty of ships, but like I said, usually cargo or luxury, sometimes military. There had been kids, but it was always some snotty ensign or rich trader's daughter. The military guys were young sometimes, but they were all adults and all went into harm's way by choice. But these settlers, they were all just people. None of them really had anything but building supplies and some cattle. They just wanted a new life. I saw the hope dying in their eyes. I'd been out there all my life, and it felt like waking up into the nightmare I'd been living. I went and found the 13-year-old that was by herself. Pulled her out of the pen. A few other humans tried to stop me, but the guards shocked them. Told the guards I wanted to see how she cleaned a pirate princess's quarters. They laughed. They had no reason not to believe me. I was one of them. One of the best. It's just that, all of a sudden, I wasn't. I was disgusted with all of this. Myself, mostly. I started remembering being a kid before they took me. All these memories I had locked away of a time before I was this thing. I brought her to my quarters. I shared some ration packs. She stared at me the whole time. At some point I realized she wasn't scared. She was appraising me, scanning me up and down, weighing me like cargo. This juvenile human. Natalie. I found out her name was Natalie later. But then, she was just this kid with no name. Absolutely fearless. It should have made me laugh, but it didn't. Instead, I felt something other than the self-hate and shame that was bubbling up. Something I felt for the first time in years. Fear. Stupid. I could have snapped her like a twig, but the fear, it wouldn't leave me alone. It was like my old instincts were waking up. I don't know why I started talking to her. I don't even know all the things I said. I just know I told her everything. Being younger than her when I was taken. All the things I'd done. Still being mostly a kid, but feeling like I was old in some awful way. All the death. And then I was crying. These horrible, tearing sobs that actually hurt. All the while, this kid just stared at me. Once, for a second, I think she was crying too. But she never said anything, just kept her eyes locked on me. Weighing. A beat of silence filled the bar. Hema took a breath and carried on. You know, I'm not sure how many of our people went missing before they noticed. I just remember I noticed Kret hadn't checked in with me. He was the weapons officer and enforcer of the crew. Absolute monster of a guy, and a real disciplinarian during cargo processing to prevent skimming. If you went off on an errand longer than 10 units, your comm would be screaming. I checked my chrono and it had been 23 units. No messages on the comm. I stood up in a rush, told the kid I had to go, to stay put, and she grabbed me. The bar was somehow more silent now than when it was empty. The drinks sat untouched. The tension was there, but so was a cautionary curiosity. This kid, her grip was so strong for a small juvenile, it actually hurt. I told her that, no, I had to go, and she should relax and stay put, and we'd figure something out. All she said was, stay in here. It wasn't like a youngling begging. It's like she was warning me. We sat and ate the rations and stared at each other. I was too exhausted from crying, and she didn't ask anything else. She just sat there, patient, while I grew increasingly less so. It must have been 100 units. And then the door to my quarters opened. Hema stole a ragged, halting breath. Her pale green skin had flushed steadily darker. Her companions recognized the signs of distress, but none moved to help her. All sat transfixed. A human walked in. Adult. Male. Large and muscular. A second behind him. Adult. Female. Small, but in a manner that I instantly recognized as predatory. Live and deadly. Like a Calaxian silk scorpion, smooth but with deliberate malice. I could tell she was the deadlier of the two, and I could tell she was going to kill me. They were wearing some sort of advanced, multicolored reddish-purple combat armor that gleamed in the deck lighting. The faceplates had been opened. It was only when they stepped across the threshold together that I realized the armor was silver. The reddish-purple was gore. Both of them were coated head to toe in blood and entrails. It dripped and slopped to my cabin floor. I'll never forget her voice when she first spoke. It was nothing like the human voices you've heard. Not loud. No laughter, no smile. It hissed from her like a gas leak. Did you really think you would take her for yourself, worm? My blood ran like ice. I wanted to explain that I'd been trying to save her, but I was too terrified to move or speak. I saw she wasn't holding a large rifle like the male. She was holding some sort of thin, micro-vibrational sword. It seemed to hold still, but blurred if you tried to focus on it. I scrambled back as she closed on me, slowly, and continued to hiss. Your gang of filth died so fast, you won't be as lucky. I was in the corner, still petrified by her gaze, until suddenly, as the blade neared my throat, a small hand touched her bloody wrist and grabbed it. Don't, Mum. She stopped. The blade didn't move away from my throat, but she listened, and it became suddenly clear to me. Nathalie was their offspring. I sat mute while she told them everything that I had just finished telling her, about my childhood, about the things I had done. They scammed me during the story, just like she had, but with an intensity far higher. Their impulse to kill me was still near the surface. I could see them actively having to hold it down. Their features never softened, even a little. When her daughter had said everything, it was quiet for a long, long time. Finally, the male, her father, spoke. It was like gravel under a tank tread.
How many lives have you taken as part of the quiet?
My surprise must have betrayed itself on my facial expression, because he smirked, every bit as cold as her mother's glare.
Yes, we knew about the quiet. How many?
I finally found my voice. I gave a shaky, I don't know. It was the wrong answer. His face twisted with just a glimpse of a sudden fury I realized he had been containing until now. It was terrifying. He shouted so loud my ears rang for 2 days.
Guess!
Trembling, I stuttered. At least 100. I think saying it out loud made it real because I started sobbing even harder than I had telling Natalie. I entirely forgot my fear. I curled up on the bloody floor and cried. Not for myself, for all I had done, for who I used to be, for my old life. Mostly for my victims. I forgot anyone else was in the room until I felt the juvenile place her hand in mine. She sat with me until I regained control. Her parents hadn't moved. Their faces hadn't softened at all. Finally, her mother spoke. What is your name? Hema. Hemovalent. Hemovalent. Based on your confession and my field observations, subject to review by the Veiled Council, by the power granted me under the remit of contingency, as set out by Terran Congressional Article Black 0, subsection C, I hereby find you guilty of 100 counts of murder, of 1 count grand piracy, and of 1 count aiding and abetting mass slavery. The sentence imposed for each of these offences is death. All sentences are imposed consecutively. I was too weak to object, too deep in despair to feel fear anymore. I just nodded. However, as you can only die once, I determine that your sentence is unsatisfactory, and under the aforementioned authority, I suspend your sentence indefinitely. You will serve a probation that will last your natural lifespan and any artificial extensions. This sentence and probation, unless overturned by the Veiled Council, cannot be expunged by any mechanism of law, human or republic. You are seconded to the Terran Department of Contingency. You will serve as our eyes, ears, and hands for the rest of your life, to atone in some small part for what you have done to the innocents traveling this sector. You are not permitted to surrender. You are not granted the privilege to mourn. You will live and you will atone. Hema's story ended abruptly. The silence in the bar was more than physical now. It had suffused the very being of all present, a shade of terror over the revelry not entirely unrelated to the story. Chimi was the first to speak. He said only, "Contingency?" Hema nodded. It's a human government agency. Secret. We think they're fun, silly, reckless, relaxed. Most are. It's how they prefer to live, but they're not nearly as innocent as we think. There are some of them that keep their animal instincts as sharp as any warrior, any assassin. I fear quite a bit sharper, actually. They do it to protect the other humans, to let them be the comic relief. Those Horizon colony ships all have a contingency cell hidden inside their settler population. Weapons and armor concealed in the farm equipment and food stores. They've never been helpless. They watch and protect. A hidden blade right at the throat of everyone who might threaten humanity, while we all laugh at how ridiculous they are. A bit of silence, and then the chuff that turned into an amused growl.
Yeah, sure.
The growl was halting, unconvinced of itself.
Those clowns are secret warriors? Some super clandestine agency nobody has ever heard about? You are a pirate princess? Good story, Hema, but we just wanted to hear about some dumb humans getting up to their nonsense. Save the drama.
There were a few chuckles from the others, also unconvinced. Scylla also spoke up, while casually standing and stretching. Yeah, I mean,
If that was even true, they'd make you keep it a secret. They'd kill you if you told it at a bar. Enough of this. I'm going back to my ship.
Hema just nodded. That's usually true. Scylla stopped and glanced back, curious and wary. She looked up. Her heavy guilt from telling her story had faded. There was something sharper in her eyes now. They would normally kill me for sharing all of this. That's very true. But they wouldn't kill me for doing my job. She glanced pointedly around the room, person to person. Scylla, the Gelber fume sticks you knowingly wide distributed to your dealers in Pila 2, even though your contact had told you they were a defective batch and one use was fatal to mammals. You killed over 7,000 humans and other mammals. It wouldn't have even cost you to throw them away. Your contact was getting you a new shipment for free. You just wanted more profit. You sure were outraged I was a slaver. Fine act for a mass murderer. Chimi, you ran explosives to the next dawn, despite their well-stated intent to target hospitals and hospital ships. 2 of your bombs were traced in successful strikes. They even told you that the next dawn might start hitting civilian targets. You said it wasn't your business. There was a company of Terra Marines recuperating at one of those hospitals. Bad luck for you. Illyra, you distribute entertainment starring children. All species, galaxy-wide. You're one of the largest distributors ever recorded. You've paid off almost every politician. But just a few couldn't be bought, could they? Turns out they wondered why you tried so hard. You might have kept it up for a while. Though, for the record, they wanted you even before you distributed the first human content. That just poured fuel on the flames. The silence in the bar has shifted from performative anger to calculated fear and desperation, until Illyra bubbled a laugh, her tentacles shaking. Even presuming you could prove any of that, this is Bentpanel. No violence. Neutral. Have fun telling the humans your theories. We'll be long gone. The three began moving quickly toward the door. Hema glanced at a final dark corner of the bar, at the 5th occupant. By the authority granted to me as a field agent under the remit of Contingency. An ancient weathered voice cut her off, sharply. Save your speech, kid! A shriveled finger pressed a button, and the bulkhead slammed closed. The entertainment screens, usually piping in sporting events during livelier hours, snapped to life, all depicting an incoming vessel. It was unlike anything Scylla, Chimi, or Illyra had ever seen before. Dark, angular, and dangerous, like a shard of carved obsidian. But the construction was still clearly human. The ship was decelerating, on final burn for Bentpanel's docking ring. This is Bentpanel! Scylla shouted hoarsely, with increasing panic. This is neutral ground! You can't do this! The 5th and final patron of the bar emerged into the light. The elderly Yelenian caretaker gazed impassively. Her arms cradled an ancient but very well-maintained plasma blunderbuss, and she held it as steady as bedrock. To Hema she said, Please tell our guests that all bulkheads are open to them, and all defenses are offline. I welcome them to Bentpanel, and will start some of that awful beam water they love so much. To Scylla, disdainfully, as if just noticing him, she said, Bentpanel is my home. It's a safe place for outcasts and vagabonds. Not scum. Don't worry about your tab, by the way. It's on the house. In a sparsely populated fringe strand of navigable galactic space, secreted in a tucked-away corner of a small, unremarkable sector that was last properly surveyed nearly a millennium ago, a weathered and creaking station orbits a small grey dwarf planet without a name. Centuries ago, the station was called Galactic Trade Subnode Kappa Epsilon 35. These days, it's just Bentpanel Station. It may still house the clutter of the galaxy, but it never tolerates the trash. Tonight, as the outcasts and hustlers sleep, 3 of the galaxy's worst beings await with dread the inexorable approach of justice. The elderly Yelenian caretaker wrinkles her nose at the beam water, and a former pirate princess takes one more halting step toward atonement.